Hey, what's going on, everybody? A special beer for episode 17 of The Beer Enthusiast. Why is episode 17 so special? Because it's really our 52nd episode. We're kind of considering this our 1 year anniversary of doing this, 35 episodes on Instagram Live and now 17 on YouTube. And we've got a pretty special one. Huge shout out to Asher at the brewery for hooking us up with this beer. It's a oak aged. It's called Petit Mardi oak aged imperial stout with petite Syrah grapes and Syrah grapes. Um, yeah, we're going to talk about this one, and we're usually we would pour them, but we've decided we're going to kind of let them sit for a little bit while we talk recipe, because this is one that's definitely going to benefit from having a little bit warmer of a serving temperature. So I'll talk a little bit about the beer. Thankfully, Asher was able to share a lot of information about the beer. Petit Mardi
Awesome.
actually translates to Small Tuesday. So again, kind of playing off of the Black Tuesday sort of theme. And this was also inspired by, I think in 2021 they did a Black Tuesday portified beer, and so this was another in 2022. This was a kind of play on continuing with the wine theme. It's a co-fermentation. So it's their Black Tuesday recipe with Petite Syrah and Syrah from two different. I think I can't tell if it's two different places or if this is just the name, but it's Fabliste Wine and Rancho Ciscoque
Mm.
are the names of either the places or the one place. I'm not sure, but nevertheless, two different kinds of grapes, and then they fermented the whole thing with their house yeast. Which one thing that makes sense that I didn't know that he shared. It's a diastatic yeast,
Yeah,
which
right. We learned that little nugget for some of their big beers a while back, and it makes some sense that you need some extra juice basically to get through to get through some of these big alcohol beers or to create these big alcohol beers.
right, right, exactly. Yeah, we'll kind of let's do kind of a quick explanation. Diastaticus yeast is sort of a, if you haven't heard of that, maybe you've heard of, is it I think it's STA1 is
Hmm.
the other way that they're kind of referred to. Basically, they produce enzymes that help them break down a lot of the larger, more complex sugars that sort of normal Saccharomyces usually isn't able to. And one of the reasons that a lot of people really because one question some people get is like, well, is this worse than a Brett infection? Is it not as bad as Brett? And one of the things is that once it's there, it can kind of start off working kind of slowly. So you can kind of finish out your fermentation, you can you can package, and then all of a sudden it can start really working while it's in the package, and so it can lead to like exploding bottles. And like really dangerous situations like that. And then, of course, if you have something that's creating a re-fermentation, you're not only getting carbon dioxide, you're getting alcohol increase. And, by law, there's a certain range that you're allowed to, have a margin of error. So you can run into problems with that. And also just off flavors, if it works and then it doesn't clean up diacetyl, it doesn't clean up acetaldehyde, because maybe there's not all that, that much sugar left that it just kind of stops working. You can get all kinds of problems with that, but obviously they've been working with this forever. They know this yeast ridiculously well, and they've obviously used it to great effect for lots of their beer.
Well, and that's the main idea with a lot of other potential brewing problems, right? Is like when it's unintended, or your yeast morphs, or you have a diastaticus infection somewhere in the brew house, and it's unbeknownst to you. That's like an extremely bad problem.
Yeah,
If you brew with the yeast a lot and you know what you're doing, and you're targeting it towards that desired outcome, you're going to be fine.
right. Exactly. Yeah, so it's fermented with their house culture, and then it's their standard Black Tuesday recipe. The original gravity is 25 degrees, 25 degree Plato OG. They do a double mash, he said, and their base is 2 row. And then he said they have a whole slew of specialty malts that they use for both color and flavor, slash aroma. And then this is punchin aged. He didn't say for how long, but for beers like this, don't know many places that go below a year. That seems to be kind of a minimum. I think when a lot of people start out barrel aging, it's kind of hard to leave the beer alone. You want to sample it after 3 months and 6 months. And you listen to these guys now who, were getting into it 10 years ago, and now they're just the absolute masters of that craft. They're just leaving it and just forgetting about it for, for a year before they even start thinking about tasting it, let alone even, they might even go longer than that, depending on the recipe. They might just know, how their, again, just kind of how their stuff works. Right.
Yeah, and it's the difference between, well, it's how much character you want to impart. It's the kind of barrels, if it's they're likely not the first use of these puncheons, obviously. So you potentially want to leave them in there a little bit longer to soak up all that oaky goodness, or whatever wine or spirit was in there previously. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, if you're using fresh French oak or something, maybe you don't have to age it as long, particularly for beers that aren't as alcoholic as some wines that might be aged
Yeah.
in that French oak. But this is a big beer. This is 16%.
Yep.
15.9. We'll just round
Yep.
up, makes it sound cooler. And that could slumber in a puncheon for a long time and to
Yeah.
coax out and stand up to a ton of flavor. So maybe we'll be able to taste a little bit of that. Who knows?
Yeah. That'll be fun. And also, just before we crack into this, just the packaging is beautiful. It's kind of it'll come off once you kind of have to take the cap off, but it had this little kind of ribbon attachment here, and if you haven't noticed yet, it's a cork. It's not a cap, which I think is really, really cool. So
Well, and it's not even a bottle that is traditionally used for beer. It's basically a bottle used for port wines. Like if you've ever
yep.
seen port on the shelf, they're usually in these
Yeah.
kind of smaller dessert wine style bottles.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, kudos to them. I mean, we were looking for kind of an anniversary beer for our little show because it's the 52nd time that we've done this, or the 52nd beer, and we've moved everything to YouTube. So that's the funny thing about it being episode 17, but we've really been doing it for a year. But everything about this beer, right down to the packaging, creates the psychological profile of celebration.
Yes.
It's a specially printed label. It's a bottle that's not normally used. It's a very special beer with a unique process, and so we wanted to do something special. And our good friend Asher really, I mean, just overwhelmed with his kindness, for
Yeah.
making sure that we could get a hold of this. So thank you so much to him and everyone, all of our friends at the brewery.
All right. I think
So
we've waited.
I'm
We've waited
pumped.
as long as we can. Yeah. Let's do this. So
Yeah, and it's my first go at this beer. Yeah, it is a stopper bottle, just like a port wine. That's cool.
so I've got my brewery tulip glass. Can't get away from proper glassware.
Yeah, I'm just
So
gonna go with a little kind of like Tiku taster glass.
nice. That is a good choice. Definitely a good choice.
And if you can see if you're watching in the video, it pours basically still. It's also trying to
Mm-hmm.
kind of mimic that kind of texture and body.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's this really dark. In terms of color, it's got this. The edges have like a ruby hue to them, but you can kind of tell it's the color is. I mean, it's literally a combination of like a really dark red wine and an imperial stout. It's really got this. It's kind of trying to look like it's black, but there's still these like deep purple, ruby, garnet kind of hues that uh, that you can kind of see through. It like not only it doesn't even create legs; it's just like a sheen of of
Yeah,
around the glass. Like there's not even these little legs that come down. It just creates a film across that just sticks to the to the side of the glass. You don't see that very often, but where there are some tears, I mean uh, they are moving slowly. So
it really does look the part of a really dark port wine.
yeah, I agree. All right, well let's dive into the aroma here.
I can tell you one thing: when I popped the cork, I could smell it immediately.
Oh
It
yeah,
is
Absolutely.
very, very aromatic. And it smells, I mean, first impressions to me are it's more wine forward than stout forward,
Yeah.
which I
Yep.
would imagine is a goal of theirs. It's got this very rich
Yeah.
impression of,
There's like I get like raspberry truffle. Um, I'm
yeah,
getting a little bit of obviously it's a sweet impression, but I'm getting like a little bit of like a sweet vermouth.
yeah. I get not just raspberries, but blackberries, mulberries, all those
Yeah.
kind of like darker seeded berries that have the much kind of darker fruit note. Not dried though. It smells like pretty fresh
Yeah.
berries.
Yeah, there is you definitely get a little bit of there's definitely a little bit of oak though, and it's very it's not like really super charred oak. It's not like a bourbon barrel. It's very clearly like, a puncheon or a wine barrel. It's got a little bit more of that kind of like fresh wood character, maybe even a little bit slightly herbaceous in nature, but not so much but you can also tell they haven't really extracted it to the point where you're getting like coconut or dill or a lot of really forward vanilla kind of extraction, but there's definitely some underlying wood character.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's a very pleasant convergence of just kind of like a raw woody aroma with a lightly earthy character, kind of like a
Hmm.
grape stem, raspberry, blackberry seed type of character, and very lightly herbaceous, kind of even hard to pinpoint what kind of herb it would be.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, it's not in your face. It's more like it's tangled in with the oak character.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
you're right though. The stout is really playing playing in the background. It's almost a little bit of like I get like kind of like a Dutch cocoa powder.
Yeah, or and you had said raspberry truffle earlier, and
Yeah.
that rings true from the standpoint of one of those types of chocolate covered cherries or raspberry truffles that's very fruit forward, right? That the chocolate is a much milkier, mellow
Yeah.
chocolate.
All right. What about taste here?
Yeah, I gotta go in. I'm just done smelling this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. There's a little bit to unpack here, folks.
Hmm. Oh. Ooh. Oh. Ooh. That is
Hmm.
fun to drink.
Yeah.
So what was interesting when I very first sipped it, it's kind of like goes in four stages to me. It was immediately because it has like no carbonation. It's kind of like the body of a wine. I'm thinking
Right.
fruit, dark like cab type wine character and texture up front, and then it starts creeping into stout territory, and you're getting some chocolate, a little bit of cold brew coffee,
Hmm.
kind of like two-thirds of the way through, and it's very like cocoa powder. Um, it's not like a super roasty dark chocolate
No.
type of character, and it reminds me of kind of halfway through the palate like a really extremely fruity single origin cold brew.
Yeah.
That's got little pangs of acidity, lots of dark fruit flavor, a little bit of that low, like almost no bitterness. Really smooth coffee character. But then when I went, that was all the afterburn is like fresh fruit. That was
See, and
like,
to me, it just got like ridiculously. It just got so the fruit just went like into like jam. It would just went into
yes,
like fruit jam on all the things that you said. It's almost like a just a mixed berry like compote jam. It's just, oh my gosh, it's so decadent in that way that it's just been reduced down. There's sugar's been added. The fruit is no longer tart anymore. It's but you're right. I don't know if I've ever, and obviously it's probably because I don't drink a ton of wine, if any at all, that I don't you don't often experience an ethanol warmth like this in beer.
mm-hmm.
We're used to things being slightly floral or even just just alcohol character that's warm but just doesn't really have a whole lot of impression at all. You get that, I think, in a lot of higher ABV German beers that are just trying to be sort of really kind of neutral in terms of yeast profile and alcohol profile. Whereas when you lean Belgian, you get these floral characters, things like jasmine, things like lemon or liqueurs. But yeah, this is just like a really jammy liqueur. Um, Again, honestly, it just keeps me kind of coming back to this kind of vermouth kind of thing. That's really that's what's driving it home.
Yeah, it's like, to me, a tale of two finishes. You know, you're
Mm.
when it goes into that just intense berry jam character, that it's almost like someone stirred in some
Yeah,
jam right
yeah,
before I
that's
like
exactly
finished the
right.
sip.
Yes,
You know what I
that's
mean?
it.
It is that
Yeah,
potent. Um, but that is not to say. So this is definitely a sweet beer, and intentionally so. But it has the structure of a wine where there's a little bit of tannin. There's
yep,
just like a little bit of grip, and that's probably both from the grapes themselves, but also the you know dark malt character.
yep,
Wood
yep.
can
The
impart some
barrel,
of that as
absolutely.
well.
Hmm.
And so it's not this just like flabby sweet uh, dessert beer, because there are elements to kind of the contours of the beer that are like keeping everything in place. It's like just when you think it's going to get a little bit sweet, not, it's like, no, that tannin just wraps it all in this really, really nice structured blanket.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, and the finish isn't, again, it doesn't have kind of that it's warm but it's not hot. It's not medicinal. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, you're definitely going to be sipping it, not not saying you're going to be like crushing this back or anything. Um, but wow, what a delight.
Yeah, this is a special beer, and it's what's really fun too is you already kind of alluded to it, but you and I are not wine enthusiasts. We know very very little about it, so it's cool to see it marry in a beer that we do know a little bit about
Right.
and have had the opportunity to taste, but also just like holds one complete foot in the beer door, right? So it
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
when we're talking this is super duper jammy and it's still and there's no carbonation, you might think that this is like so unrecognizable as a beer. And maybe you hand this to 10 people and they're like, this is just like a dessert wine.
Yep.
And then I think that means, that the brewery has accomplished some of their goal. But for us, for two people that are not really all that much into wine, I do enjoy wine, but I know virtually zero about it. Um, it does hold just enough elements of beer and barrel
Hmm.
aging that are like uh, that are familiar to me.
Yeah.
So it's
Right. And
still
I
got
think
some beer
with
stuff here.
right, and I think also that's just where beer has come, right? If you would have maybe
Hmm.
given this to someone in 1998, they would have just said this is wine. Like you said, this is dessert port, like. But we've the scale has tipped over so far with pastry stouts and barrel aged stouts and barrel aged barley wines and additions of all these other things that obviously the next natural step was working with wine grapes, wine barrels, co-fermentations. There's lots of different considerations that you have to take when you're thinking about brewing and making a beer that has a wine sort of element to it. Are you just using a wine barrel? Are you doing a co-fermentation with grapes? Are you just going to maybe use grape skins for things like thiols? Like they have, like, phantasm powder is literally just dried grape skins. Are you going to use it for in that sort of way? Are you going to use like pumice grapes, like that have been spent, and then you're going to use those, kind of as an addition to either condition on, or like there's just lots of different, even just carbonation level. This
Yeah,
makes sense that this would be still. If you said there you were kind of doing something with Chardonnay grapes or Chardonnay barrels, you would not want it to be still. That would not, that would be a place where I think in the beer side of things, you would want the beer element of carbonation if you were working in that area. Whereas, obviously Chardonnay isn't, highly carbonated or anything. But again, you're kind of making these decisions. What from which side do we want to bring that we think is going to be, um, both the best representation of that side of things, but also just like you said, how is it all going to be wrapped up in this nice bow, and in this nice blanket so that it all just makes sense together.
Yeah, and what is your desired outcome when you're brewing with when you're co-fermenting with fruit, right? Because we've had
Mhm.
several breweries even out here are known for like fruited stouts or fruited barrel aged stouts, really
Hmm.
jammy kind of stouts, and those I would describe as more like 75% beer, 25% fruit character, and this inverts that to me.
Mm. Yeah.
This is their end goal clearly with the packaging, the kind of like celebratory nature of it. It's fancy. Let's just be honest. It's awesome. But the intentionality here is centered around port and wine, um, through the lens of a beer maker, and so I think that comes through in spades for me. I think they just knocked it
Yeah.
out of the park.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to let this thing sit. I mean, we're a little over 20 minutes in, and I told Chris I was going to let mine sit for 10. And this is going to change and kind of evolve in the glass for, easily another, and thankfully, I mean, like you said, it's 16%. What a nice way to, kind of wait out an hour, and just enjoy this thing every so often. I mean, for me, one of the things I was actually just really wondering, I was like, when we were talking about, extraction from barrel, I was like, maybe, I was like, are we going to get a little vanilla? You kind of hope you're going to get it. It's a really popular thing, and I think there's a little bit of some, now that it warms up, I think there's some kind of creeping through a little bit. It's kind of working
Yeah,
with it's kind of really working with all the fruit too. Just kind of reminds you of ice cream almost.
yeah. The texture really helps with that. As it warms,
Mm,
and it's kind of silky, smooth, not super thick. It does have a little bit of a thread of vanilla for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
that's a
this
good
is
tale about real briefly, just
yeah.
serving temperature. We've kind of alluded
Mm,
to it that we had this sit for a minute, but um, the nice thing when you're opening up something like this that is probably going to present a little bit better at a little bit higher temperature. And it's just scientific fact that the colder something is, the less of the flavor that you can perceive, which is a really huge advantage in some situations. But for something like this, which is a contemplative beer, something you want to sit with, enjoy slowly because it's high alcohol, quite a bit warmer is going to be fine, all the way up to room temperature, even. And so, but the beautiful thing is you could start with it cold and just take your
hmm.
time. Just sit
Yeah.
with it, have it at different stages over the course of the night, and decide for yourself, kind of what temperature stage you like it at the most. For me, I think this is just going to really sing at like 55, 60 degrees. Just
Oh
have
yeah.
the slightest chill on it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think if you're not one to, wanting to wait to start, but you're willing to kind of wait it out in the process. Yeah, I would start it at 40 and take a sip and see what it's like. I think that's part of the fun of it. So we've done experiments like that with beers where we've tried them straight out of the fridge, and then after 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, and we've been pretty surprised. I think when we first kind of went into it, we were all kind of thinking it's probably just going to be after an hour, right? Because this is like a barrel aged beer. We probably won't like it straight out of the fridge, but after an hour, like that'll be plenty. But we were liking some of them, a couple hours in. So
Yep.
it's a fun experience to try. But um, now the thing to tackle is this is quite an intense beer. So now we've got to move on to food pairing. So what are we going to do with all this?
It's a lot, and I think it's kind of tough. I hadn't had this before, so I kind of was keeping a couple of different ideas in my pocket to choose from,
Hmm.
to make sure that I have
Oh yeah,
some
yeah,
good
yeah,
tools
yeah.
at my disposal, that I'm not falling
Hmm.
into any pitfalls. And one that I really, really want to try this with Oaxacan mole.
Mm.
Um, and the trick there is it can be spicy, and higher alcohol is going to accentuate that. So I would want to make a version that's not like absurdly spicy, obviously, because I'm not looking to set my face on fire with this. But I definitely, mole has dozens of different variations all across Mexico and Central America, and so the Oaxacan mole is like a black mole, and it's got upwards of 30 ingredients in a lot of preparations. But what it does include that I think is going to be awesome here is really just like no brainer complement with chocolate on the remnants of stout base that are there. It's mole. That kind of mole is often made with raisins. So you're getting a little bit of like dried fruit match with that jammier kind of fruit character that we've got. And then something that the beer doesn't really have that I think is a neat opportunity to fold in with the mole is nuttiness. And that is, most Oaxacan moles have some sesame seeds, almonds, some will even use roasted peanuts. And since it's a black mole, they're like roasting the heck out of these things, right? And they're basically balancing all of the kind of bitter elements of a supremely roasted charred pepper. It's usually got a trio of chiles in it with roasted nuts, and then folding in all kinds of sweetness, the raisins, literally piloncillo sugars. And so it just becomes this like really decadent amalgamation. And so that's a really difficult needle to thread, I think, because that
Mm.
type of mole is extremely complex, and the beer is complex too. And sometimes complexity on complexity is just too much. It's just like, does it? It's like a complicated math problem that you don't know what the answer is going to be. But I think that there's enough synergy there between the complements of, you know, the simple complements of chocolate on stout character, but then the
Mm.
little bit more high end complement of dried fruit and nutty character with the what is coming across to me as more of a fresher fruit character in the beer.
Hmm.
And so I think that'd be really fun. And I just want to make sure to not make it so spicy. That's traditionally served over like a roasted chicken. I would use the fake chicken part, but this is really about creating a really decadent black mole. And I think that would be really nice with this. The other kind of savory dish I was thinking of was like a stuffed charred eggplant, which what you stuff it with would be important. I was a little bit worried at first about the acidity of tomatoes, but I think that would be okay here. And I just like that earthy sweetness of an eggplant. And then, this is going to be really interesting with however you kind of want to griddle the cheese on top of it. But yeah, stuffed with tomatoes, chickpeas, kind of a nutty tahini sauce, and then topped with kind of a combo of like a really kind of simple fresh cheese like mozzarella, but a little bit of Parmesan as well to get that kind of like crusty cheese character. And I think that could be kind of nice too.
Yeah, I think that sounds. I think that sounds great. Yeah, because I think even though you're, because you're right. I think the first thing people might think is it's just kind of you're doing kind of chocolate on chocolate. What's
Right.
the but one, some of the chocolate could stand to be drawn out of this beer.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing that I would in response to a comment like that. And then what I like too is because you're getting a lot of this spice character, I think that's kind of what's missing from the beer, and I think makes a good contrast. And that really drove my pairing. Because again, I just was like, let's just start with something at the base that's going to be a really like just great compliment, and then figure out what we can do to create a nice contrast with what the beer maybe doesn't have. And for me, that just landed me at steak au poivre, just with that
Hmm.
peppercorn, that slightly crushed peppercorn crust. The again, it's just, I mean, it's, if you're looking at this as a wine, I mean, Syrah with steak is just like, it's a no-brainer. It's Syrah goes great with all kinds of meats, from lamb to to roast beef to steak, hard sear, all that Maillard character. It's going to be perfect with all of these jammy fruits. They're all going to play super well together. But then you're going to put that peppercorn crust, maybe some kind of cognac cream sauce. I think might be fun to do with this too. Kind of create a
Mm.
little bit maybe some more alcohol complexity, but without the alcohol from the sauce. Maybe burn off some of the cognac alcohol before kind of putting in all of the fat and to kind of create the creamy part of the sauce. So I think that's pretty straightforward. And I also think this could be interesting if you kind of threw some. I'd be interested just to throw some Brussels sprouts on the side. They don't necessarily have to go great with the beer, but this just has that sort of just aged, thick, kind of aged balsamic kind of note to it. And I think just a nice charred oven roasted Brussels sprout might just be like adding a good ingredient to a dish that the beer is. And for for beer and food pairing, we think a lot about how two things are going to sort of meet and if they're going to go well together. And then I think about cooking, and I think, well, people look at really complex dishes and they think, well, if I just add this one thing, it's going to make it so much better. And they don't think, well, if I add this, it's just not intense enough, and it's not going to do anything for the dish. It's like,
Yeah.
we kind of get into that, that's kind of what we've drilled into ourselves, as cicerones. But there is part of it where if you're just adding something else, I've gotten people who just, they say, what do I pair with pastry stouts, that are breakfast themed? And I'm like, literally just think of everything in there that's breakfast and what's missing. And so it's like, yeah, I would actually just try and pair that with bacon, because it's a
Hmm.
pancake themed one, and it's just I want bacon with that. So just just warm up some bacon and drink that stout. That's all you need. So like, it doesn't have to get too complicated. The great thing is that it can do both. You can get super complicated like a mole or a classic dish like a steak au poivre, or hopefully you can just really roast some Brussels sprouts and get them really nice and charred. Uh, and hopefully this just kind of works like a nice little balsamic drizzle. A little bit on the sweeter side, kind of that aged thing. I think that sometimes works a little bit. Doesn't mean that the Brussels sprouts are still going to be the star of the show. Maybe the beer is going to be a little bit, a little bit more of the star, but I think it's still going to add something to it. And again, this is the side dish. We're really trying to aim at the steak, but I also don't want to seem like I'm just trying to pair with the main course. And usually folks don't just have steak; they usually have it with something else. So I'm taking a shot there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair shot to take, and we've often been surprised how hearty and intense, some cruciferous vegetables, root vegetables, and Brussels sprouts in particular can present and be. So, if you're worried about intensity on something like that, you could even add, and people love to add their bacon to their Brussels
Yep,
sprouts.
that's a great
But
choice.
that goal of turning it into kind of like a balsamic character on there is really great. You can amp up the intensity of those. What I like about the first two dishes that we mentioned too is they're both celebratory, right? You don't make Oaxacan
Yes,
black mole every day. You don't go out for steak dinner every night.
right.
And,
That's fair.
so treat yourself as well with when you're pairing with what for us is a first year anniversary beer of the beer enthusiasts. So
Yeah,
let's celebrate for
yeah,
real. I love that.
yeah. And then for dessert, I actually want to have a little. I want to have a discussion about dessert in, because usually, this is going to be, the part of the dinner, or this is going to be something that's going to kind of end the night. And there's kind of two schools of thought that we've run into when it comes to beer and dessert. There's the you go all out. You don't really care about cutting anymore. There's no more food after this. You don't need to cleanse your palate anymore. There's nothing that's coming up next. Like, just let's just go rich, 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 hard, wreck your palate. It's going to be great. Let's indulge. And then there's kind of the other side where we want people to kind of come back and enjoy the experience of a beer dinner and come back and do it again. So we still want something fun, but we don't want to just like have them going home and thinking, oh, like that's something I'm only, like you said, I'm only going to do on special occasions because wow, that was a lot. So just
Hmm.
kind of making it a little bit more of kind of like a lighter, more fun experience that maybe comes off as more as something that you can do um, every so often. So I'm curious to see which side of the coin you landed on for this, because that was definitely a choice in my mind.
Well, you are a Nostradamus of sorts because I selected two things and they're each side of that coin. So
Awesome, awesome.
um, the more decadent one is I wanted to do peanut butter pie. You get
Yeah, that's a
like a
great
kind of
choice.
fluffy peanut butter pie. It's kind of like oftentimes it's made with like cream cheese and cream and it's got this like really fluffy and creamy texture to it, creamy peanut butter, etc., with like a graham cracker type crust. And people dress that up in all different kinds of ways with either,
Oh yeah,
a lot of times chocolate is involved. And I'm just going to like leave that out of this situation. I'll just make old school peanut butter pie. What is chocolatey in the beer is going to present as that kind of just little chocolate drizzle on there. But as jammy as this beer
I know.
became, this is just like peanut butter and jelly
I
sandwich and
know,
dessert
dude. That's the
once it
first.
goes together.
I was like, oh, this is too good. I was like, this is so
Yeah,
good. Peanut butter pie is the
it's not like a dry, like a bone dry high
oh
society wine that would be difficult to pair with dessert. It is like a
no,
jammy
yeah,
raspberry grape jelly, kind of forward beer. And so, yeah, peanut butter pie is the decadent version.
yeah.
The less decadent version is you could just have a little bit as a digestif after dinner with, like the Italians do, with like a nice biscotti. So,
Yep.
and you can play around with biscotti quite a bit with different ingredients. And I thought one with some dried fruit, like dried cherries in it, and some a different kind of nuttiness like hazelnut would be really nice. So you just have one or two pieces of biscotti. You have your 5 to 8 ounces of this beer. It's after the meal, and you're just sitting. And there's also a really great textural contrast too, right? A lot of times they'll have biscotti after the meal with, if not with alcohol, with like espresso or coffee. And biscotti, you kind of like gotta break it off. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like crumbly, and you
Yeah.
need some liquid to relieve all of that
Absolutely.
crumbliness. And so I think you use this beer to loosen up that kind of grainy, decadent dessert crumble character, and then it just intermingles with the hazelnut and the dried cherry, and that feels like a nice couple of bites post meal thing that's not leaving you, like you felt like you ate so much you don't feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, and even for your peanut butter thing, I might just do the same thing you suggested with my Brussels sprouts thing, and just maybe go full on like Elvis sandwich, and just like, you know, caramelize some bananas and sprinkle some bacon on top, and go to town that way. So
Yeah,
that's
that would be
but yeah,
great.
those are great, but those are great choices. Yeah, I landed on just a cheese dessert. Um just doing something that's super, super complex, and really the best thing that I could find, after just trying to find, honestly, just after trying to find a cheese that's really going to be intense enough, because I've had this beer before. And there's a cheese called Grayson, and it's from Meadow Creek Dairy, and it's a really intense, like wash rind cow's milk cheese. But the from everything I've read and researched, the flavors are just like extremely pungent. I'm trying to think of some other ones. If anyone's ever had Epoisses, is something very similar, which like that cheese. I mean, my spouse can tell when I bought it when she walks into the house, because the smell like permeates through the refrigerator.
Yeah.
It smells so pungent, and so it's something to that effect. And if you haven't read any books on cheese by Liz Thorpe, she has got like advanced Cicerone, mass Cicerone level descriptors for cheese. Because I'll read her book, and then I'll do Google searches, and I'm just like, I need to stop with the Google searches. Like her descriptors are just, so much better. She describes these as having really big flavors of Kalamata olives, beef broth, French onion soup, and roast beef fat cap. And I know, and it's just like, that's what I'm saying, dude. That's the level
Yeah.
I want to be at with cheese. It's the level we want to be at for cheese, especially for the master exam. But I'm just thinking about that with this, and I'm just like, get out of town. Like,
Hmm.
like, yes, yes, please. So I think that's just a fun, super decadent cheese dessert. And maybe, not going to be too many beers that can, play that well with a cheese like that. So maybe a fun pairing that you also, again, don't get to do very often. Just something that you actually can pair with either of these things, because they're so intense.
That's a great philosophy with this beer in particular, right? Not much is going to out intensify the beer, right?
No,
So things that you've been having trouble pairing with stuff in the past, things that aren't quite intense enough, throw this big delicious thing at it, and maybe it won't work out exactly the way you wanted to, but you're not gonna like bowl over
it's
the
not.
beer. there's going to
Yeah,
be some stuff going on that you can play around with, work on those
exactly.
descriptors, see what kind of bridge from the cool cheese descriptors you can get to the
Yeah.
beer, all that fun stuff. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep. It's an unpasteurized cheese, so I don't know if it ever. I don't know where Meadow Creek Dairy is, but I know cheese pasteurization is a weird topic in the United States. But that's gonna be one I'm definitely gonna look for because I know we've got an extra bottle from Asher, so I think we're gonna have to put that one to good use. I think we'll have to cook up some of this stuff because this is quite the um, wow, quite the beer, quite the beer.
Yeah, we've got a lot of, on that subject. It's 52 beers in on episodes for this. We've got a lot of ideas, and that's as good a justification as any to practice a bunch of them. So we
Yeah.
have an extra version of this beer. We have way too many ideas, and we need to we
Yeah.
need to put some more of them into practice. Several of the things on
Yeah.
different episodes we've tried before, or feel good about the interactions based on other stuff. But I'd never had this beer before. You'd had it only once or a handful of times, and it's you know we'll celebrate again is what I'm trying to
Yep.
say. We'll celebrate again, and we'll
Absolutely.
make some of this stuff, and we'll let y'all know how it turns out.
Absolutely. Awesome. For next week, we are for 52 episodes. The fact that we have not visited this, a beer from this brewery yet is quite surprising. But we're going to be doing a beer from Russian River. And before you before you take your guess, it is not Pliny the Elder. We are going Velvet Glow. We also actually haven't had a Munich Helles. We haven't reviewed one on the channel, and this is their interpretation of Helles. So we're really excited to feature that one for next week. So make sure to tune in. Make sure to grab a. I know they're selling them in cans and they're in distro. So check it out. And make sure if there's somebody who can maybe hook you up with one, or there's lots of places making Helles, thankfully. So find a good Helles near you and taste that one along with us too. That'll be just as good.
Yeah, good excuse to pick up a local Hellas if you're not near Russian River's distribution footprint. So going back to a little bit more widely available style of beer, and but still, still reason enough to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cheers, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Instagram. We're at the Beer Enthusiast. Chris is the Fresh Beer Enthusiast. I am the Vintage Beer Enthusiast. Here's to a year. Thanks, everybody, for all of your support, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers to you. Cheers to everybody.